And welcome everyone to this week's Business Bytes. I got the thumbs up from Andrea, so it's time to kick off again. Welcome, Andrea, as always.
Welcome.
And we're delighted to be joined by one, possibly two guests this week. Beverly, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business, please.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Thanks for the invite. I'm Bev Ryan, and I help smart people publish really good quality non-fiction books to grow their business and their profile and their brand. That's what I do.
Fantastic. Well, this is timely because I'm working on a book.
Cool. Well,
and as part of the whole process here, we don't do any research. So this is great. So, yeah, well, tell us about the benefits of having a book, so a non-fiction book. So that, so if you're like a lawyer or an accountant or a coach or a trainer or something like that. So can you talk us about the benefits of having a book?
Yeah, sure. So most of my clients are in business in some shape or form. So they're writing a book when they set out, they're actually writing a book, obviously, to use it to just kind of build their brand, not really their brand, but kind of build their visibility in the marketplace and use it as a tool for attracting people to their business, to their message, whatever. And I think what they find out during the process is they actually go through a fairly steep self-development program at the same time. So it's kind of professional development, personal development happening together. And the benefits when they finally achieve this book, because they're not necessarily writers, they're business owners, and they know the value of a book, but they may never actually have written, and they may have just grown up with the thought that they actually can't write because of some silly teacher back in year 10. So, it could be a bit of an obstacle and a hurdle, but they've got the motivation to make this thing happen. So that's the purpose behind it for most of my clients. And I've got kind of two parts to what I do. Book coach. As a book coach, I help people at the start of their book. So someone like you, we could have a little mini book coaching session here today. So I'll help people right at the start with, they've seen other people write books and they think, yeah, that's a really great idea. But they don't really know what specifically to write about, and they don't, they're sort of not sure what content will work best for their business at the time. So they need a bit of help sorting that out. There's a lot of clarity involved in that early stage because you've got to put your hand up and say, hey guys, I've written a book and this is what I stand for and this is what I believe in and this is the message I want to portray in the book. So you've got to kind of know what that is. So it's a really basic level, who am I and what do I care enough about to kind of go public with this thing and be seen for this message.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had quite a few people on the show that have written their own books, and they've all gone it through various ways. Yeah, I thought it'd be a simple process, and it isn't like anything. It is if you get coaching and help and support, and it isn't if you try and figure it all out by yourself. So, if someone comes to you and they go, "I want to write a non-fiction book," where's the balance between storytelling, which engages a reader, and, like a non-fiction
facts
report kind of thing? Like, how do you balance that? Because that's one of the challenges I'm facing at the moment.
Yeah. I think, what's are you happy to say what your book's about or what the purpose of it is? Or
Yeah, so it's about the hidden things that hold you back in going after what you're looking to achieve. And it's lessons learned through ski coaching across North America and Australia.
Yeah.
And so it's really about my journey when I stepped out of ski coaching and went to start ski racing as a master's ski racer.
Yeah.
And I had a coaching background, so I kind of thought I knew what I was doing. And then I got in the start gate of my first big race and it said racer ready, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm far from ready. In fact, I just want to bail out of here and hide. So it's that going from that point to several years later, having the same person ask me the same question in the same race, and I finally got ready. So it's that kind of journey. So mine's very story driven, because they're all ski stories and experiences of learnings. But I'm struggling on multiple levels, which we'll talk we can talk off camera about. But for a lot of people, it's like, Well, I guess one of the biggest challenges, people discount what they know, and they don't realize how much gold is in what they know in sharing that. So in my sharing the balance, it's kind of like, I'll tell the story, and my biggest challenge is, as coach, I used to reinforce the point over and over and over again. And so in my first draft of what I've written, I realized that I'm probably going to irritate the hell out of the reader because I've made the point, and then I just need to trust that they've got that point and move on. Yeah,
so there's a couple of things there. I think you asked about storytelling. The kind of books I work on and the kind of book you're writing, it's really all about the reader. Even though it's your story, it's really recognizing, well, what's the reader want? What do they want out of this book? So you need to recognize where they are at the start of the book. Why are they picking your book up? What dilemma are they going through? What fears or anxieties or doubts have they got when they find your book? And then they will read your book because they want to get something out of it for them. Your story will enhance that journey for them. So you need to know where they are at the start, and you need to know what point you want to take them to. I mean, your analogy there of the ski slopes of being, I'm not ready, yes, I'm ready. That's probably the scope of your book.
Yeah,
that's
right. Yeah.
So you know that. So then you'll be presenting maybe processes and theory and tips and things for the reader and how to do that. Then just use your own story to illustrate how you applied those to yourself. So I think stories within nonfiction books are better just to engage the reader. Instead of just reading like a document about how to do it, we all respond so warmly and energetically to a story that then illustrates what we've just read. Or they read the story first and think, wow, that sounds fantastic. How do I do it? Then they get the facts. Okay, this is what you need to do. I think that's your balance. It's knowing where the reader is at the start, where you want them to end up, and telling them how they can do it. And just sort of that empathy, well, this is how I did it, so I'm sure you can do it too. And what you said about just repeating things, you've got to also understand their level of experience and intelligence as well, and think, I don't have to tell them this 10 times, particularly in a book. You know, like in a conversation, you say it once, it's gone. In a book, you might write it in chapter 2. It's there in chapter 2. You don't have to repeat it in chapter 4 and chapter 6 or whatever. You might refer back to it. Say, look, like I talked about in chapter 2. Now you can do this and this there. So stories are critical for engagement. But if it's just your story of how you did it, it becomes like a biography or a memoir, but that's not what you want to use it for. You want to engage. You want people to come to you for coaching.
That's correct. And so in sharing my story, I'm sharing all the things I was essentially doing wrong that I've figured out, and sharing it. So I kind of flip mine around. So I'll tell the story and then have some notes at the end of the chapter, which is kind of like, so this is. And it's kind of like a comment. I think I'm going to do it a bit of a commentary. You know how like you have a sporting event and the action takes place, and then they kind of dissect the play-by-play.
Yeah,
after.
no, that's great. Yeah,
kind of going down that road. So
as long as it's logical, it doesn't matter which way. So that's the other. It's got to be logical, and that's when you get to say to the editing stage, or you might get someone to review the book, or someone an outsider to read it. They'll come back to you, I don't know what's going on here. Why did you go from here to here or here to here? You won't necessarily pick that up yourself because you kind of know the whole picture. But that's all part of the editing process. That logical flow. So when you're writing the first draft of a book, don't paralyze yourself by thinking it has to be perfect, because it doesn't. The first process, the first run through is just get the words on paper, on your laptop or whatever. Get the words out, and then there'll be lots of going back through it yourself and rearranging things and culling, and you'll get so sick of that manuscript eventually. But when it comes out in a book, it's like, wow, that's what it was for.
That's really good advice. I've seen it said where your first draft is considered draft 0 because it's really just like mental vomit, where you're just getting everything out onto the page,
Yeah.
And then you re-look at it, and then you go, well, I can use this bit here, and then you start to tie it all together.
Yeah. And the way you construct it, or anyone can construct it, just kind of depends on the way you best visualize things or best work. So you might be the, I'm not really, I mean, I'll do a lot of work on the screen, but when it comes to final proofreading or something, I print it out and I've got to see it, you know.
Yeah.
I wrote my own book. I wrote a book called Smart Women Publish at the start of last year. And it took me a while to get it finished, but that's normal. When I finally came back to it. And the only reason I actually finished it was because I went to a workshop about making a decision, setting a deadline, and just getting your diary out, put lines through your diary, and you make it happen. And I, you know, all the stuff we as coaches teach other people to do, or suggest other people do, you've got to just apply that to yourself. And then, so you might even be the sort of person where you print it out and then spread it out on the floor and think, okay, well, that section there, cut out that section there and physically move it back to another, you know, depends how you work best.
Yeah, that's because I've been working with this subject matter for 15 years. So, and I've created some online programs as well. So I've done that in other processes. So in writing the first draft, I wrote it pretty rapidly. And then I went, oh, what do I do? What do I do with it after that? And that's, and so for the listeners out there that might have started on a book in the past or have an idea on the book, your first encouragement is to just get it out there and I guess turn off your self-editor at that stage and just write the thing.
Yeah, I'd go back before that. Now, as a book coach, I take people through a program called a book blueprint, you know, writing a book blueprint. So, you know, that's really critical. It's basically running a plan for your book. And it's got the logical, you know, the things you would obviously have to consider. But even that first one of getting clarity about your business as a business coach, you know, we all know that a lot of times, particularly I think self-employed people, we do a lot of different things to create an income. But when you're writing a book, you have to, okay, well, which one of these many things I can do and I can help people with, which one of all of that do I want my book to be about? Because the book's going to potentially increase that part of your business and your life. So sometimes there's got, you know, it's a fair bit of clarity needed for that for a lot of time, for a lot of people. Then the next part is, well, who's the book for? And really drilling down on who the reader is, and which again is a basic business principle, know who your market is. But then, okay, and then understanding them, well, like I said before, what do I want to take them through? What process? Well, where do I want to take them from where to where? How am I going to do that? That's your process. You know, how am I going to get them from A to B, or A to B to C to D, whatever? What steps am I going to use to get them there? And this is, you know, it's all basic coaching, online programs going through the same process. And then in the book blueprint that I work with, the really essential part is just really expanding that plan before you start writing. Because if you just sit down to start writing, even though you might have a skeleton, if you just sit down and start to write, it can be a much longer process than it needs to be. And I think that's where you can kind of write yourself into a corner, or you feel like you're not getting anywhere, or you know you're repeating stuff, but you don't know how to not to repeat it. So that book plan, which is part of the book blueprint process, is really critical. And to the point where once you've got your chapters mapped out, you then look at the overview. So how is that chapter? What am I taking people through in that chapter? What are they feeling in that chapter? How does that chapter lead on to the next chapter? All of those, you know, that sort of more in-depth outline is really, that's what you can do in that stage. And then part of the book blueprint program is to actually start writing, and it's write the first chapter, write the final chapter. So again, it's like your bookends. It's like really getting clear on where I'm starting people in my book, where I'm taking them to in my book. And ideally, you'd write a couple of versions of that first chapter, a couple of versions of the end chapter, because the beauty of doing that is that you're playing around with your author voice, and your author voice is it's kind of relaxing into being an author. It's a bit like, you know, you talked earlier about these conversations that you want them to be natural. Chances are, if you write a couple of versions of the first chapter, it's going to be like the third or fourth version that you'll actually relax into being who you really are, and having the courage to be a bit more engaging and a bit more relaxed and be more natural. If you're not a writer, but you've done a lot of business writing, the first chapter, your first go at your first chapter might be a bit stilted and a bit businessy. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's all really good advice, and I've been working through all those things that you've been talking. So it's yeah, because I'd even forgotten. Yeah, because I stopped after that, and I went, oh, what do I got? Oh, I don't really have anything. And then I went, oh, so I went and found. I didn't know about you, to be honest. I found a writing blueprint and went back and actually did those steps that you did. Yeah. And I sat there and went, oh wow, and then I can, and it helps just sort of you get to this sort of mind map kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And because my writing style, because I've been a writer as well as a coach for 20 odd years, but all my writing style was magazines, so ski travel and experiential stuff. And then I started to write a story. I'm like, oh man, I don't know how to write a story. Like, you know, I know how to read one. So there's all, and my style is more sort of pantser. I kind of know where I am and I just write. Yeah. Whereas I encourage everyone out there to plan as much and get in contact here and get hold of a blueprint, because it's you can, I mean, because my experience was I actually wrote this 15 years ago and then had no idea what to do with it or whatever, and so it sat, you know, in a cupboard, not helping anyone. So it's
Do you bring a lot of sporting analogies into business?
Yeah, well, this one,
skiing analogies.
Yeah. So the book is it's more about it's more personal development than business. So even though a lot of the people I worked with are really successful business people, it's more lessons on life. Yeah. So the book's more in that sort of personal development space rather than business. Yeah. And because I was ski coaching, every day people would come to me and they'd want to achieve something that was maybe outside their comfort zone. So it's all about how do you get comfortable achieving things that are outside your comfort zone. Yeah. And firstly, as coach, I kind of just worked on instinct, but then I literally studied this pretty hard for a good couple of decades. And then I finally, when I took some of what I knew and then applied it to ski racing, I suddenly realized I have no clue on what's going on.
The reason I said, I think using analogies from what we do really well can just transfer really well across to a book. A friend of mine who's a very successful coach is also a pilot, so she often uses analogies from learning to fly and flying and whatever in her coaching, and it works. It's a very natural fit, and also that's quite inspiring. So anything that inspires other people, like, you know, international skiing, piloting a plane when she was in her 20s, and even though that's not what they want to achieve, it's still inspiring.
Yeah, and you can draw, because I've been not beta testing, but just testing on a few of my friends who are who were like ski clients of mine in the past, and I've just been testing different things on them. And they'll come back and they'll go, I get that you're talking about skiing, but I'm actually applying it to my golf, or I'm applying it to training my kids.
Being able to do that,
So I'm kind of still, but we're still in the early stages. So if for the listeners out there that think, you know, they see other people writing a book, and I'd encourage everyone to go into the process. And as you say, like, I agree 100%, like the first draft, the second, third, fourth draft is where you start to really find your balance point, or what was your voice?
Your author voice.
Your author voice. And so once you're clear on, you know, you've done your planning, you've done a few draft like starts and finishes, first and last chapters, and your author voice, you're sort of comfortable there. What would then be the next stage for the would-be writer?
Yeah, it was kind of setting your pace. Obviously, you've got to write, and we're talking about people whose primary activity is not writing; it's doing something else, running a business or whatever. You've got to really figure out how you're going to make this thing happen, and which is basic time management, and everybody's going to be different with that. And some people work, people work in different ways. So it is really identifying what way you work best. And for some people, that's going to be 1 hour in the morning. There's people who do, I went through the Key Person of Influence program a few years ago, and writing a book as part of that program. And our author coach there was Andrew Griffiths. And he encouraged an hour a morning. And some people did that. And, if you do that, you'll get your 30,000 words in a month. Other people will do it in stops and starts like I did. I know what does work really well for a lot of my clients is to take off big chunks of time. Well, not huge chunks of time, but just block out chunks of time, because I think for many people it's hard to kind of switch your brain into something for an hour and then out again and then come back in the next day. So I'd really encourage realizing that it might take you 6 months to write it, or 4 months or whatever to write it. Obviously you've got to give up something, but I think in COVID times that's pretty easy. It's not, whatever. So, if you work best in the mornings, do 2 hours in the morning. If you work best on weekends, whatever. What I ended up doing was just blocking out 2 separate weeks at the beach to do the finish, the major finish. Even when you think you're nearly finished, there's still lots to do. And I got to the point where I realized I wouldn't actually finish it unless I went away and just shut myself up for a week here and a week there. So, and I think it's keeping your eye on the prize. Why are you doing this? Because there'll be a time when you're writing which will feel like a really hard slog. So you really have to be tuned into, what's the final goal? What's the end goal? And that should excite you. That should excite you at the start. It should excite you at the finish. And it should be enough to excite you through the process. So that's a really critical part of that early stage. Why am I actually doing this? And visualizing the end result, which is obviously a book. But what can that then bring me if I've got this book and it's a quality book, and I get it in the hands of the right people? What can that bring to me? How will that book enable me to help other people? That should all excite you. And vision boards and all sorts of things that keep you on track to get the book written are really important. And then after that, it's kind of production stage. So I also I've got a team of editors and graphic designers. So I do manage the production of books as well. So I kind of do the start and the finish, which is really exciting. So at the moment I'm working on a couple of books for authors, just finished a couple of weeks ago. So usually I only got 2 or 3 going at a time. And I really love that process of taking a manuscript in a Word document through to cover design, and the editing happens usually at the same time as the cover design. The editor's working on something and I'll engage the designer and then we'll work on the cover. And then when the editing is done, and that's a couple of processes, there's 2 or 3 processes there, we then work on the page design, and then when then the manuscript gets dropped into the page layout and starts to actually have a visual result. And it's really exciting. I love that side of it as well.
Yeah. And can you just, for the listeners out there, the editing side of things was something I wasn't aware of. It's because it's more than one edit, isn't there? Sometimes there's a structural edit, then there's another kind of edit, and there's a few different passes by a few different people. Yeah. Can you just talk us through how that sort of process works?
Yeah. So what we do is, it's called 2 sweeps. So a comprehensive edit. So the editor will take the manuscript. So the author really gets to a point where they think they've got everything covered off, and that's really where I'm involved as well in that production stage. So I'll just kind of check with the author. Have you got a forward? Have you got any information you want to put in the back? Usually people will write the manuscript part, then they think, oh, okay, I need this and this in the front, I need this and this in the back. So when that's all done, it goes off to the editor. Now, So the editor will go through it the first time, the first sweep, to really look at the big picture. Is it structured well? Does it take a reader through a logical process? Do the chapters kind of make sense? Are the chapters too big, too small, whatever? So they'll do some work at that level and send it. They'll change some things, but anything which is really up to the author, they will put comments through the manuscript, like, do you want this or that, or I suggest this goes here or there, so that then they'll send that back to me and I pass it on to the author. So really it's a work in progress. So the author then goes through the editor's notes. They'll also supply a page of notes. So the author goes through the notes and the suggestions and the comments, and then it's up to the author then to either agree to the changes or whatever. So they then send that back to me, and it goes back to the editor. So the second round, the editor kind of finalizes everything. They'll implement any major changes, and then they'll do the fine tooth comb through the grammar and the spelling, punctuation, that sort of thing. So it's kind of big picture first edit, details second edit.
Yep. And then from there, cover art starts to kick in, and then page layout starts to kick in, and you're really down the production cycle, aren't you?
Yeah. So with the editing and everything, because people are self-publishing, I help people self-publish books. So all the final decisions are theirs. That's one big difference. If you went through a traditional publishing company, which is not easy to do, but because they pay the bills, they make the final decisions. So they'll make the decision about how the cover looks and the editing, whatever. So even book title, I've talked to authors who, they've been published by big publishing companies, but the title is not what they wanted. But, they don't have any say in it. But as a self-publisher, you have all the final decisions. But I think that's part of my role as a project manager, production manager, is to kind of be the person with the publishing knowledge to help them make a good final decision. Whereas if they didn't have anyone advising them, they may not make the best final decision. Things like the book title, particularly book subtitles, they can be simple, but they can be tricky to get your subtitle right. Because the subtitle actually does most of the work. Your book title can be short and sharp, but your subtitle tells people what the book's actually about. What's the benefit of this book? What's it really about? And then the cover on the blurb on the back cover is a really critical marketing space. So most people need help with that. And it's not really the editor's job. That's not the editor's job. Definitely not the graphic designer's job. So my role in all of that is to be the person that's kind of the sounding board, the guide, and the guide through all of those.
Yeah.
Little but big things.
Because if you don't get that right, then someone who's potentially in your target audience may look at it and think it's not for them when it's perfectly suited for them. Yeah. So once you've got the finished product and it's self-published through Amazon or through the big publishing houses, as in self-publishing houses, do you help them promote the book as well, or is that back onto them because they've got their business networks, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, that's currently the marketing stage. So I don't really, I don't help people market their books as such, but I've got one author. She published her book early this year about financial planning. She set up her own financial planning business after being in a major bank for a lot of years. So she used her book to go public to launch her business. So here's my book. I know what I'm doing. I've got 10, 12 years experience, even though nobody knew of her because she's been in a bank. And English is not her first language. So I help her quite a bit with just editing press releases and just getting the language right, or LinkedIn posts, that sort of thing. So that's really, because I know her book really well and I know her, so I'm sort of helpful for her in that way. But I have just kind of teamed up with a PR program, Handle Your Own PR. It's a platform which helps any business owner promote themselves to media through press releases. So I've just added that to my full service. So if somebody works with me to produce their book, they'll get access to that author PR program for 12 months as well. Because that's, and again, I can help them with, you know, the press releases and, you know, what's their main message and that sort of thing. But that's all incorporated in the program. It's not my program, but I'm working with Jules Brooke, whose program that is. So yeah, so I think that's a really important part of supporting authors. I'm not really, you know, I'm not a book marketer, but I certainly can help people get, you know, organise their thoughts and what their media strategy might, on what their media appeal might be in terms of a story, that sort of thing. I'm quite helpful with that. Yeah.
And so in terms of the process, at what stage do people come to you? Do they come to you at the idea stage, or do they come to you at the first draft and oh crap, it's bigger than Texas, help, or is it a bit of both?
Bit of both, yeah. So if somebody wants help with their book, you know, with writing their book, they would come to me when they've just had that, you know, they've just had that yearning for a long time and they know they've just got to do it soon or it's not going to happen. So there's a book coach. That's where I would meet most people at that point. Well, I've helped earlier this year. I helped a business owner with kind of reviving her book. She was writing her book, but she kind of got stuck with it, and she knew it wasn't right. She's a professional, and she knew her book was not written in a way that would appeal to the reader she wanted it to appeal to. It was a bit too academic and whatever. So, and she just didn't know where to go with it. So I worked with her, and she went right through that book blueprint again, because I mean that's the beauty of that exercise, that book blueprint process. She went through that in relation to the book she's writing, and she saw where she'd gone wrong. So then she's now redoing the book, and she'll be able to use some of what she's done, but and there would be a multitude of stuck books out there, I'm sure. So I mean that is a whole space I could help people with, is how to get your book unstuck, how to get your book finished. So those starting it, unsticking it, finishing it, that's where a book coach works. And then with the book production side, mostly I would meet people at a point where they just about finished writing the book and they sort of realize, oh, okay, now I've got to sort out who's going to help me produce the book. So they might come to me and ask for a quote, have a conversation. That sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of tools for writers out there to help them with the process, there's a few different online tools and things like that. You mentioned earlier Word. Do you just kind of recommend that they use whatever they're comfortable with in writing?
Yeah, I mean, with Word, that's the format, that's the how we want the document for the editor, is in Word document. But in terms of writing tools, if you mean like how to write, or do you just mean the platform to write in?
The platform to write in,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah.
There's one called Scrivener, which I've not used myself, but I know people who use it and love it. So I think the benefit of Scrivener is it makes it a lot easier to move sections of text around and store notes, and you know it's specifically written for writers. So you know, I've heard a lot of glowing reports about that. I've looked at it, but I haven't actually used it myself. But yeah, definitely would recommend that if somebody is really serious about wanting to use a tool that's helpful. And there's always a learning process with everything, so if you're prepared to invest the time in learning how to use it. But there's heaps of information on how to do it, how to use it.
Yeah, and because I jumped across from Word to Scrivener.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because I did all my writing in Word, but that's just magazine article writing, which is pretty short. Whereas when you've got a big project, I've found it quite helpful. But again, I'm no expert at it.
I always tell people when they're writing their book in Word to set up a separate document for every chapter. Everything you do, it has a separate document. But there'll come a time towards the end where that all has to come into one document. But it's much easier to manipulate it when it's all separate.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And what about the people out there with if they know they want to write their book and they're good at talking about it, but not necessarily great typing or things like that, voice recognition software, is that something that's worked for some of your authors? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I was speaking to a gentleman a few months ago. He's definitely a talker, not a writer, and he's sort of figuring out how to do that best. I don't really know much about voice recognition, so I don't know how accurate they are. I sort of feel like, well, I know that one good way to do it is just record your voice, get it transcribed by your transcription service, and then get that back. And then obviously you've still got to go through that and fix it up. So I guess that's, well, if you're the person that's going to get the transcription back and then still have to go through it and tidy it up, are you better just to write it? I mean, this is what people have to decide. I know that I think that particular person was thinking about then getting somebody else to tidy up the transcription. So, you know, none of this costs the earth, but it's a cost. And if you're writing a 40,000 word book, it's going to add up. But it's still, you know, if it gets the book done, and while you run your business, then that's great.
Yeah, it certainly comes down to resources as well, and time, and because there's other business owners that you know, have someone else write their book.
Yeah.
That's a ghostwriting question, which
that's a ghostwriting service. That's quite expensive, but
so I use Dragon Naturally Speaking software, and out of the box, it's incredibly accurate. Cool. And it learns. You train it as you go. So that's pretty good. I'm laughing.
Every time you could train a dragon, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I laugh because if the thing is, you need to switch it off, obviously, because when the phone rings and then you start talking to someone and then you come back to your Word document, you've just got a jumble of all this, like it's just been trying to come up with, like, and you talk a little bit differently to the system than you do when you're on the phone. So it's just this jumbled mess. It's like, oh my God, I've done it again.
Dragon brain frazzled.
Yeah. But for me, that I find I can't type as quickly as I can talk. And sometimes I can lose track of ideas. But with that said, I'll go weeks without using it as well, where I'm just happy on the keyboard. So for me, it's horses for courses. Not that I'm any great writer here or trying to hijack the show, but I'm just giving, I guess, the other perspective of the person trying to knock it out.
I think if people listening to this will really relate to what you're going through. So I think it's probably a very helpful conversation, hopefully.
Well, when you mentioned that, you know, that there's another business for you just to help people get their book unstuck. Yeah, my book, I wrote it and I was going to change the world 15 years ago. And then I literally didn't know where to go. But back in the day, when you go back, it might have even been longer than that. Anyway. Back then, self-publishing was so much more difficult than it is now. Yeah. And when COVID hit, I went bang, because I'll get this book done now because I've got some extra time, and it was on my to-do list for 2020. Anyway, so it was literally on my radar. Yeah. And after I did the first draft, I went, let's have a look at self-publishing. I couldn't believe how far self-publishing has come in the last 15 years. Can you just explain a little bit to the listeners about how unbelievable the opportunity is now for self-publishing compared to...
I think it doesn't matter what you produce, if you're an artist or a musician or whatever, just the online technology or digital technology is amazing. So I think the most helpful resource available to self-publishers is a company called Ingram Spark. Don't know if you've discovered them yet, but and they're just getting better and better all the time anyway. They started out, or they're a branch of a company called Lightning Source, which I first discovered about 10 years ago. Anyway, Ingram Spark today is an amazing business. They have huge printing workshops, so they print books. So that's kind of the first one. But they also have an online book distribution catalogue. And so when books are listed in their catalogue, they go out internationally. So booksellers all over the world will find those books and can resell them. They also do print on demand functionality, so that your book might appear on Amazon as an ebook and a print book. So people can buy, actually you can do both through Ingram Spark now. People can buy your ebook off Amazon through Ingram Spark, or they can buy your print book. So that when the order comes from Amazon for a print book, it goes to Ingram Spark. They'll print a copy of the book and they'll send it off. So they're a book fulfillment service. So with my authors, I set them up with their own account with Ingram Spark. So effectively, they become publishers of their own book. They can then, and then the files will go through onto Amazon and lots of other booksellers as well, not just Amazon, but Booktopia and all those places. But the actual publisher, the author, can log in anytime they need more books at home. They can just log into the back end and order themselves a box of books. I ordered a new box of my own books about 2 weeks ago. They arrive within a week. So, you can order one copy for yourself. So that print on demand service is incredible. So Ingram Spark's really a big player in the self-publishing world now. And like I said, they're improving everything all the time. They've got lots of different size books that you can print. They've got various cover types you can now choose. They do hardcover, they do soft cover, they do a new kind of, I don't know what they call it, but they kind of got 3 cover types now that you can choose. Yeah, and a couple of different, not a lot of different paper quality. They use good paper, but there's not a lot of choice. But so that's probably a big player in the self-publishing world. Is that what you've noticed? That sort of functionality that's
well, yes.
improved?
Well, one of the reasons why mine just went on hold was because I wrote a first draft, and then back then you needed, self-publishing really wasn't that much of an option. So you needed to find a publisher.
Yes.
And then I was going down the rabbit hole of writing letters to publishers and stuff like that. And then it just all got too hard.
Yeah.
And I threw my hands up in the air and thought I'll revisit it down the track.
Yeah.
But so, because I didn't know about Ingram Spark, but Amazon, you can load your book up to Amazon as well, can't you? And
you can use Amazon directly.
As an ebook, and they'll publish on demand for you as well. Because back in the day, it used to be a bit of a rort where if you wanted to do your book, you had to have a minimum order of a ton of books.
Yeah. Most people would, they'd get books printed and delivered to their house, so they might store them in their garage or whatever. So the print on demand is the great change with the digital publishing machines. You can just print small amounts at a time, and you don't have a big stock. I started publishing. I went into self-publishing in 1997 with a magazine, and we were just at that point just starting to have computers in. Pretty much everyone had one computer in the house at that point, and we did have internet. Yes, we had emails then. 97, definitely. But I started a magazine, and the thing then was distribution was kind of there was no digital magazines, and so it was all print magazines. So I needed to find a distribution company to take my magazine from the printer to the news agencies. And it's a bit like approaching traditional publishing companies. And I did that quite quickly, actually, but only because I went to a news agent and asked, how does this happen? I had no idea how to get a magazine into a news agency. And this is the thing about figuring out how to do anything. You just kind of go to the end and work backwards. Ask questions, people will tell you. So I found a magazine in the news agency, and he said, this quilting magazine is published by a local person. Why don't you give her a call? And so I did, and I had coffee with her. And then I think she introduced me to the distributor of her magazine. So that's how I got into things. So, but that's how you had to do it. But now you can get your books into bookshops, and bookshops are just one of the ways that people buy books now, and not the major way anymore. But it's certainly nice to say, oh, my book is in the bookshop or whatever. It's a nice thing to say, but it doesn't have to be the only end goal. But if you want to do that, you can certainly try. But book sellers they might find your book in a catalogue and order your book from Ingram Spark and then put it on their shelves. They can do that. You might never know that's even happened. Or you can go to a book distribution company. There was one called Dennis Smith that closed down a couple of years ago, unfortunately, but there is another one called Woods Lane. Woods Lane is a book distribution business, so you would have to supply them with maybe 300 or 400 books. They then send them out physically to bookstores, and then you would get some sales money, maybe, you know, 3 to 6 months down the track, you still have to apply to Woods Lane to even be considered. And obviously they've got to check the quality of the book. So you can't apply to them until you've got a book to send to them to show them, which kind of going backwards then means that, you know, if you seriously want if you want your book to be taken seriously in the trade, you've got to produce a good book. You've got to pay for editing, you've got to pay for design. You know, there's a self-publishing world out there, which is do it yourself, and that's fine. You can do it yourself. But if you want your book to stand up as a solid business book in a professional world, you kind of got to pay for the things, you know, get them done right.
That's right. You can't cut corners.
No.
Really great advice for everyone there. So the Ingram's company, so if you publish through them, will they supply, is that just Australia or are they international? Would they supply?
It's international. They opened up in Australia. We've actually got a printing house down in Melbourne in Australia. It's international. It's global distribution. Yeah.
Right.
It's Ingram. It's INGRAM. Ingram Spark.
Ingram Spark. So if I got my book through them, then like a book chain in the US could order the book. Yeah. Because I was wondering how you actually got on the shelves, because I know how you get onto Amazon, but Amazon's online. So you can also get onto the shelves through going the distributor angle. Well, that's really interesting.
So when you set up your account and then you add your book to the Ingram Spark system, there's lots of, you know, you just select certain things, and they've got a global distribution option. So you select that, and it fills in all the different prices in all the different countries around the world.
Right.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool.
That's really interesting, Andrea. I know you had books in the works from time to time. What a great show today.
I think what I've got from today is, and thank you so much, Bev, because I think people have a rather blue sky approach to, I'm going to be an author. And so they start down the pathway of writing, only to realize that actually there is a process to writing, and that's only stage one. then you've got the next stage, and that is actually having someone to edit that for you. And then stage 3, you've got to look at, well, what's the book going to look like? Stage 4, how are you going to get the book into the hands of people? And I think there's a bit of a misnomer when people go, I'm going to become an author, I'm going to write a book. And then they realize, actually, there's a little bit more work required than just putting a pen to a piece of paper. So look, definitely, I think you've outlined what really is involved, I guess, the cold, hard reality of what it takes to be an author. But my question is, what would be, for those that are listening to the show, what would be the top 3 tips that you would give them before they begin?
Well, that goes back to the book planning. Yes, spend time planning the book. Really regard it as like it's a mini business, really. It's not just a book. It's take a little business approach to the book. You know, what's the point of it? Who am I going to sell this to? What do I want to use it for? It's not about the sales for the book. You might make $10 from a sale of a book if you're lucky, but so that's not the purpose of your book. Yeah, what's the bigger purpose of your book? And so the planning stage is really critical. Be prepared to pay to get a professional book. I mean, your book should be able to sit on the shelf at the bookstore, at the airport, and a business owner should see it and say, that looks like a great book. So aim for that quality. That's your benchmark. So you've got to pay the professionals to get that result. And just belief. I mean, you don't have to be an author or it's a bit of the expert thing. I think there's this thing in self-publishing, or, you know, the author entrepreneur scene is like, write a book and be seen as an expert, which really puts some people off because I'm not an expert. You don't have to be an expert. I mean, you might gather other experts, and you might be the voice that gathers other experts. But I will guarantee you that once you've written your book, you'll feel like an expert, because in the writing of it, you'll do so much research, so much thinking, so much clarifying of what you actually mean and what matters. You'll come through it at the other end. you'll feel like an expert on that little part of your world, and that's all you have to do, you know. So those three things: plan it, pay for quality, and grow through the process. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It's quite funny, actually, Peter. I was talking to a business owner probably about a month ago. She's just written her book. She's taken her book to market, and she showed me a copy of her book. And I went, I've seen this somewhere before. I've seen the copy. I've seen the picture, the image on the front of her book somewhere. And then it dawned on me, she's used whoever supported her in taking her book to market, they, on the front cover, the image that they've used is the same image that's found on selling a software in the market, selling a marketing software. And I see the ads for the marketing software company all over the place, on Google and Facebook ads, and it's the exact same image. And I went back to her and I said, where did you get the cover of your book from? Because it's the exact same image as what's being used for this particular software that's sold all over the world. And she said, oh, well, my publisher found that for me. And I just said, oh my Lord, you better find a way to leverage off this quick smart. It was quite confrontational when I saw it, but no, look, great. I'm sure you've got a few good tips out of it, Pete, for your book.
Yeah, very much so. And Bev, I forgot to say, so for those people, the listeners on the show that want to get in contact with you and find out more about your coaching and your coaching services, and how do they get in contact with you?
I'm on LinkedIn as Bev Ryan, but my main website is Smart Women Publish. I will clarify, well, smartwomenpublish.com, but I'll clarify, I do actually work with men as well, so it's sort of a marketing decision, Smart Women Publish. Yeah, so it's the easiest place. Yeah.
No problem at all. Yeah, no, it's like, it was really good. Like, I literally, once again, did no research, and when you said you help people, I'm like, oh really? This is great.
This is meant to be.
So look, I hope the listeners got a lot out of it. Clearly, you're an expert in your field, and helping people to get their message out there, and not just get their message out there, but get it out there in a professional, logical way that actually does what their original plan was. It's not as easy as you first think, but that's okay, because nothing of value in life seems to be that easy anyway. But obviously, getting someone with the right advice at the right time to hold your hand through all the different steps is fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. I'm happy to have a chat with anybody. If anyone wants to have a 10-minute, 20-minute chat about books, if they're stuck or whatever, I'm happy to do that.
Well, yeah, we'll direct everyone your way, because there's a lot of people out there. There's got to be a decent book in just about everyone. So and now has never been a better time in the world to get your message out there, because you literally don't have to produce a couple of thousand and keep them in your garage. You can produce a great quality book, order what you need, get it out there into the hands of the people out there, and really make a difference. So thank you for making a difference for all the struggling authors out there, and sharing your expertise today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. See ya.
Bye-bye. Over to you, Andrea, to hit.